Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Watch my video and subscribe my channel. For months, Nick had been living under the illusion that his rekindled relationship with Brooke was a beacon of hope, a fresh chapter that would finally allow them to put the scars of their complicated past behind them. However, the universe had other plans, cruel plans, that came in the form of a confession Ridge had let slip in a moment of arrogance mixed with desperation. A confession that would break not only the foundation of Nick's romance with Brooke, but the remnants of the trust those words, dripping with the kind of raw, selfish love Ridge had always wielded like a sword, confirmed Nick's worst fears, that Brooke had allowed Ridge back into her bed while professing to Nick that she was ready to build a forever with him, ready to walk down the aisle, ready to give him the family he had yearned for since the day their paths first crossed on the glittering docks so many years ago. And now the vision was nothing more than a cruel mirage, fading with each crashing wave that licked the side of his boat, each echo of Brooke's promises replaying in his head like a broken record, the taste of her kisses suddenly bitter on his lips as the magnitude of her duplicity settled in, because Nick was no stranger to love triangles, to heartbreak, to betrayal. But this cut deeper than any wound he had ever endured, because this wasn't just Ridge winning again. This was Ridge and Brooke playing him for a fool, turning his hope into their game. And the moment he confronted Brooke with the letter, her wide blue eyes filled with tears and her hands trembling as she reached out to explain, to beg for forgiveness, to insist that what happened in Italy was a mistake, that Ridge had manipulated her, that she had been confused and vulnerable and swept away by memories of what they once had. Nick felt his resolve crumble and harden all at once, because a part of him still loved her, desperately, achingly, but another part of him, the sailor, the fighter, the man who had clawed his way out of his father's shadow, knew that love built on lies was no love at all. And as Brooke's tears fell, staining the deck like drops of rain, Ridge appeared, uninvited, unapologetic, his jaw set, his chest puffed like a conquering hero come to claim what was always his, and the two men clashed like titans beneath the golden Californian sun, words turning to shouts, shouts to threats, and for a brief, blistering moment Nick considered throwing Ridge into the harbor just to watch him flail, to make him feel even a fraction of the helplessness that was consuming him. But instead he chose the sharper weapon, truth. And with one final, guttural declaration, he told Brooke that their relationship was over, forever tainted by the ghost of Ridge Forrester, that he would not be a pawn in their endless merry-go-round of passion and pain, that he was done being the consolation prize, the man she turned to when Ridge faltered, the man who always picked up the pieces of her shattered heart only to have her hand them back to Ridge when the tide turned. And as Brooke sobbed and Ridge smirked, Nick felt something inside him break, his faith in love, his belief that destiny could be rewritten, his dream of a future that was truly his own. And he left them there on the pier, their silhouettes framed by the dying light, while he disappeared into the horizon, the engines roaring as if to drown out the echoes of their names, vowing never to return, never to let their toxic orbit pull him back in. Because in that moment he realized that some stories are not meant to be rewritten, some romances are not meant to be salvaged, and some secrets, like the one Ridge revealed, have the power to destroy not just relationships, but entire worlds, leaving only ashes, salt, and the haunting memory of what could have been. Nick Marone didn't sleep that night. The city lights of Los Angeles glimmered like a million accusing eyes watching from the shore as his yacht drifted aimlessly along the dark Pacific waters. The letter from Ridge still lying on the table beside a half-empty glass of scotch that had long since gone warm, its taste as bitter as the truth it had delivered. Each wave that rocked the boat carried echoes of the past, the laughter he once shared with Brooke on these very waters, the whispered promises of forever, the hope that maybe, just maybe, their tangled history would finally settle into something real, something lasting. But now, all of it felt like a cruel illusion, a mirage he had been chasing while Ridge lingered in the background like a phantom lover, always waiting for his moment to strike. Nick's mind replayed every recent moment with Brooke, her eyes lighting up at dinner when he spoke of the future, the softness in her voice when she whispered that she wanted to leave the chaos behind and start anew, the way she held his hand in Italy before everything went wrong. Italy, the cursed trip that Ridge had turned into a battlefield disguised as a romantic getaway, was now a wound Nick couldn't stop probing. He thought about confronting Ridge publicly, exposing the affair, letting the Forresters taste the scandal they so often orchestrated in other people's lives. He thought about telling Taylor, about watching her perfectly polished world collapse the way his had, about forcing Ridge to face the consequences of stringing along two women who deserved the truth. But then again, did Brooke deserve to be protected? Did she deserve his silence? Or was this his chance to finally break the chain that binds him to a woman who could never choose him without reservation, who loved him only when Ridge wasn't around, who promised him everything while giving away the most important parts of herself to the man she couldn't let go of? Nick's heart ached with a complicated mix of love, fury, and bitter resignation as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sea in gold, and with it came clarity. He couldn't keep living as a shadow in their story. When Brooke finally found the courage to come aboard that morning, her face pale and tear-streaked, wearing the same silk blouse from the night before like a scarlet letter, she begged him to listen, to understand, to see that what happened with Ridge was a mistake born out of confusion, that she had been swept up in the ghosts of her past, that she had been vulnerable after their argument in Rome, that Ridge had taken advantage of that weakness. But Nick, hardened by a lifetime of betrayals, by his father, by women he loved, by fate itself, just listened as he told her in a calm voice that love could survive many things, but not this, not a deep secret, not a cruel betrayal, not when it was Ridge Forrester, the one man he had always feared would come between them, the one man who had already taken so much from him. "You didn't just make a mistake," Nick finally said, his voice low, almost a growl. "You made a choice. And you chose him." Those words hit Brooke harder than any shout could have, because she knew, deep down, that he was right. She had chosen Ridge, even in a moment of weakness, even when she swore to herself she wouldn't. And now she was losing the only other man who had ever truly fought for her. But the storm didn't stop there. Word of the secret didn't remain on the yacht for long. By evening, whispers began swirling through Forrester Creations. Hope overheard a tense phone call. Taylor noticed the absence of her fiancé's usual charm, and even Eric sensed that something was about to erupt. When Ridge stormed into the office later that day, triumphant and unapologetic, he made no effort to deny the affair when Taylor confronted him, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "It was Brooke, wasn't it?" she demanded, her voice trembling with both fury and heartbreak, and Ridge, in typical Ridge fashion, offered half-truths and hollow justifications, that it meant nothing, that it was a moment, that his heart was still with her, but Brooke had always been a part of him. That was the moment Taylor's world fell apart. Not because Ridge had betrayed her, though she had always known that was possible, but rather because she realized that he would never change, that his love for Brooke was not a habit or weakness, but a force of nature, and that she would never be able to surpass it, no matter how many times she forgave him. Meanwhile, Nick found himself more alone than ever, because they could see the storm raging within him. His crew kept their distance. He got a call from Jackie, his mother, who had heard about the scandal and told him to come home, so he could regroup and remember that the Marone legacy wasn't built on chasing Forrester's crumbs. "You are more than this, Nicky," she said, her voice firm with maternal fire. "You don't scream for love. You command it." Those words, harsh yet comforting, settled deep within him, fueling a decision he had been teetering on for hours. He would leave Los Angeles. Not forever, perhaps, but long enough to reclaim himself, long enough to make them feel his absence, long enough to prove that Nick Marone did not need Brooke Logan, or Ridge Forrester's leftovers, to define his worth. The consequences only got more complicated as the days turned into a week. Brooke tried to contact Nick through letters, phone calls, and even hope, pleading with Nick to at least listen to her mother and give her a chance to explain in an effort to salvage what little she could. But Nick refused, each message unopened, each call unanswered, because for once in his life he was choosing self-respect over the seductive pull of a woman who had broken his heart too many times. Ridge, emboldened by Nick's withdrawal, slipped easily back into Brooke's orbit, their stolen kisses now flaunted in the hallways of Forrester, as if to rewrite the narrative, as if he had won once again. But this time the victory rang hollow, because even as Ridge wrapped his arms around Brooke, he could feel the weight of what he had done, not just to Nick, but to Taylor, to their fractured families, to the fragile equilibrium that had kept their world spinning. Nick's world, however, had shifted entirely. On a stormy night a week later, he set sail for international waters, leaving behind nothing but a terse note for Brooke. "You broke what little faith I had left. I won't be here to pick up the pieces this time. Brooke, find your contentment, because I'll find mine far away from you." As the wind howled and the rain lashed against the deck, Nick felt a strange sense of liberation, painful, raw, but cleansing, like a man shedding the last chains of a life that never truly belonged to him. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect of Ridge's confession and Nick's departure reshaped the entire bold and beautiful landscape. Taylor ended her engagement, vowing never to be Ridge's second choice again. Brooke, though reunited with Ridge in body, found herself haunted by the ghost of what she had lost. A man who truly wanted to build a life with her, who offered her a love untainted by history, now gone because she couldn't resist the gravitational pull of the man she had always called destiny. And Nick? Somewhere on the Mediterranean, standing at the helm of his ship, he stared at the horizon with eyes no longer filled with longing, but with a quiet, simmering determination. Because this wasn't the end of Nick Marone. It was the beginning of a man reborn from heartbreak, forged by betrayal, and ready to chart a course where no Forrester name would ever steer his fate again. Nick Marone had always believed that suffering could either make a man stronger or break him. In the days and weeks that followed his heartbreaking split from Brooke Logan, suffering served to do both. The waves of betrayal had first left him shattered, wandering the decks of his yacht like a ghost, haunted by memories of Brooke's promises and Ridge's smug, unrepentant grin. But as the days turned into nights on the cold, churning Mediterranean, the grief calcified into something darker, something purposeful. Revenge was a dangerous word. Too often it consumed those who chased it, but for Nick, revenge was no longer a childish impulse. It was a plan, a map he would follow with precision until Ridge Forrester felt even a fraction of the humiliation he had inflicted upon him. However, Nick was not a reckless individual. He knew that striking back too soon, too loudly, would only make him appear bitter and weak. No, if he was going to dismantle Ridge and the perfect illusion he had spun around Brooke, he would need allies, unexpected ones. That's when the call came. Taylor Hayes, her voice, brittle but strong, broke through the static on his satellite phone one dusky evening as his yacht swayed in a quiet French harbor. "Nick," she said, no preamble, no small talk. "I know what they did." He paused, fingers tightening around the glass in his hand. There was no need for her to specify who they were. The wound was mutual now. Ridge had betrayed not just Nick, but Taylor as well, and in doing so he had created something neither of them had ever truly considered before, a shared cause. Taylor flew to meet him in Monaco 2 days later, her usual poised elegance replaced by something rawer, sharper. She wasn't there for comfort, she was there for war. Over dinner in a quiet seaside villa, they spoke frankly for the first time in years, not as rivals in love, not as former in-laws, but as two people discarded by the same man's insatiable ego. Taylor admitted that she had known, deep down, that Ridge's heart had never fully left Brooke, but the audacity of his betrayal, sleeping with Brooke while engaged to her, lying to both, flaunting his victory after Nick's departure, was a humiliation she could not forgive. "I don't want him back," Taylor confessed, her voice low, her eyes gleaming with a resolve Nick had rarely seen in her. "But I want him to feel what we felt. I want them both to understand that actions have consequences." Nick leaned back, studying her. The thought had crossed his mind. Was Taylor simply lashing out, or was there a deeper current here? Perhaps even a flicker of admiration for the man sitting opposite her, the man Ridge had so easily dismissed? Nick saw an opportunity, regardless of the motivation. Together, they could do what neither had managed alone. Cut through Ridge and Brooke's carefully crafted facade and expose their hypocrisy to the world that worshipped their so-called destiny. Their plan was not immediate. It began with quiet, strategic moves, Taylor leveraging her medical influence and connections within the Forrester family to subtly undermine Ridge's credibility, Nick using his business contacts and shipping empire to pull sponsorships from Forrester Creations' upcoming couture line. Rumors began to swirl in the fashion press. Whispers of instability at Forrester, anonymous leaks about Ridge's unprofessional entanglements with Brooke during international business trips. Brooke, ever the optimist, tried to weather the storm with her trademark grace, but cracks began to form. Press inquiries, Hope's uneasy questions, even Eric's raised eyebrows when contracts suddenly began to slip through their fingers. But this wasn't just about business sabotage. It was about emotional chess. Nick and Taylor began appearing together at charity galas, photographed laughing, clinking glasses, walking arm in arm. The tabloids speculated wildly. Was this a new romance or a mutual revenge pact? Ridge, seeing the photos, bristled with possessive anger, not because he loved Taylor, but because he hated to be mocked, to be replaced, to see his discarded fiancée smiling beside the man he had so recently crushed. Brooke tried to soothe him, but even she began to wonder if Taylor and Nick were truly just allies, or if something deeper was brewing in the wake of their shared heartbreak. And perhaps there was. Late nights aboard Nick's, yet turned from strategy sessions into something more intimate. Two wounded souls finding comfort in each other's company. Their shared laughter tinged with melancholy, but undeniably real. Taylor, for the first time in years, felt seen. Not as Ridge's fallback, not as the other woman, but as a woman rebuilding herself on her own terms. She didn't pity him. She didn't beg him to forgive Brooke, and she didn't tell him to move on before he was ready. Nick also found unexpected solace in her presence. She simply stood beside him as he rebuilt his resolve, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Ridge and Brooke's so-called happy reunion began to sour under the weight of public scrutiny and private guilt. Brooke found herself glancing at headlines featuring Nick and Taylor, wondering if she had made the right choice, wondering if the man she had once begged to love her again was now finding peace without her. Ridge, arrogant as ever, insisted that Nick's antics would blow over, but even he felt the subtle shift in the air. Forrester Creations' stock wavered. Their board grew restless, and whispers of a Maroon Hayes collaboration began to make investors nervous. The final blow came at the Forrester International Gala 3 months later. Nick and Taylor arrived hand in hand. Not lovers, not yet, but united, and presented a surprise. A joint philanthropic initiative funded by Maroon Industries and Taylor's Medical Foundation. One that directly competed with a Forrester project Ridge had promised would dominate the season. Their announcement stole the headlines, their photographs dominated the press, and for the first time in years, Ridge was not the hero of the night, he was the afterthought. Brooke tried to salvage the evening, but the tension was palpable. Guests whispered, photographers swarmed Nick and Taylor, and Ridge's carefully curated empire felt, for one fleeting, beautiful night, like it was crumbling beneath him. Brooke cornered Nick in the courtyard later that evening as the gala was winding down, her eyes pleading. "Does this really represent who you are now?" She spoke in a whisper, her voice shaking. "Hurting us just to feel better?" Nick met her gaze, calm and unflinching. "No, Brooke," he said, his voice steady as the ocean. "This is who you made me. You and Ridge taught me that love without honesty is a weapon. I'm just done being the one bleeding from it."